I never thought words said in private could end a marriage. That's what I keep telling myself now, sitting in this quiet house where every sound echoes. It has been 3 months since David left. The papers came last week. He wants a divorce, and it all started because I told my sister the truth. My name is Maya, I am 34 years old. I was married to David for 8 years. Everyone thought we were perfect. Our friends would say, you two are goals. My mother loved him like a son. My sister Sarah, she was my best friend, the one I told everything to. The year before it fell apart was hard. David lost his job at the factory. It was not his fault. The company closed, but after that he changed. He stopped looking for work. He sat on the couch all day. He wore the same clothes. He forgot to shave. He stopped asking me about my day. When I came home from work, tired from standing all day at the store, he would just grunt at me. The house was a mess, dishes in the sink. Laundry everywhere. He was not the man I married. I tried to be patient. I really did. I said, take your time. We'll get through this. I paid the bills. I worked extra shifts. I did not complain out loud. But inside I was angry. I was so angry. I felt like I was carrying everything. I felt like I was married to a ghost. Sarah would call me. She would say, how, David doing? And I would say, fine. But then she would hear it in my voice. She knew me. She said, Maya, you can tell me, so I did. Little things at first. He didn't do the dishes again. He forgot our anniversary. Sarah would make sounds like she understood. She would say, that must be so hard for you. It felt good to be heard. It felt like someone was on my side. The more I talked to Sarah, the more I noticed about David. Before, I would see a cup on the table and just put it away. Now I saw it and thought, look, more proof he doesn't care. I started keeping a list in my head. Every time he let me down, I added it to the list. I did not write it down, but I remembered. One time I asked him to pick up milk on his way home. He forgot. I came home and there was no milk. I had to go back out. When I left again, I was so mad. I called Sarah. I said, he can't even do one thing. One thing, she said, you deserve better. Those words felt warm. They felt true. Another time, I told him I needed help with the bills. He just looked at me with empty eyes. He said, I'll look for a job tomorrow. But tomorrow came and he did the same thing. Sat on the couch, watched TV. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to say, be a man again, but I didn't. I just went to work and I called Sarah. I was not trying to be mean. I was just tired. I was tired of being the strong one. I was tired of feeling like my life was on hold while he disappeared into himself. Sarah started visiting more. She would come over on Saturdays. We would sit in the kitchen and talk while David stayed in the living room. He did not join us. That made me more angry. He could not even make an effort with my family. Sarah would look at him through the doorway. She would see him in his old t-shirt staring at the TV. She would squeeze my hand. She would say, I don't know how you do it. I started to see him through her eyes. I saw what she saw, a man who had given up. A man who was dragging me down. A man I would not have looked at twice if I met him today. That thought came to me one Saturday. It came and it stayed. I would never date him now. The next week, Sarah came again. We were in the kitchen. David was in his spot on the couch. I don't remember what we were talking about. Maybe the bills, maybe the future. I was making coffee. Sarah said, do you think he'll get better? And I said it. I whispered it, really. I thought I was whispering. I said if I met him today, I would never date him. Never. Sarah's eyes got big. She looked behind me. I turned around. David was standing in the doorway. He had heard me. He looked at me, not angry, just quiet, so quiet. He had a glass in his hand. He put it down on the counter very slow. Then he turned around and walked out of the kitchen. He walked up the stairs. I heard our bedroom door close. Sarah said, oh no. Maya, I'm so sorry. I said it's okay. He knows I didn't mean it like that, but I did mean it. I just didn't mean for him to hear it. I went upstairs after Sarah left. David was packing a bag. I stood in the doorway. I said, what are you doing? He said, you made yourself clear. I said, David, come on. I was just venting to my sister. You know how it is. He stopped packing. He looked at me. He said, you would never date me now. That's what you said. I said, I was frustrated. It's been hard. You know it's been hard. He nodded. He said, I know. I've been a bad husband. I said, that's not what I said, but it was what I meant. He could see it in my face. He said, I'll give you what you want. I won't be your husband anymore. I thought he was being dramatic. I thought he would sleep at a friend's house and come back tomorrow. That's what always happened in fights. Someone leaves, someone comes back. He did not come back the next day. He called me from a hotel. He said, I think we need time apart. I said, David, this is silly. Come home. He said, you don't want to be married to me, so I'm letting you go. I told Sarah. She said, he's just hurt. Give him space. So I gave him space. 3 days, a week, 2 weeks. I called him. I said, are you coming back? He said, do you want me to? I said, this is your home. He said, is it? I did not know what to say. I thought about saying, I love you, but the words felt heavy. They felt like a lie. because part of me, the part that spoke to Sarah, did not love this version of him. He said, I need to think. After a month, I got angry. I told my friends. I said he left because I said one thing, one honest thing. My friends, they agreed with me. They said that's so sensitive of him. They said you were just being real. I felt strong again. I felt right. I called David. I said you need to come home and talk about this like an adult. He said, I am talking. I'm just not arguing. I said this is a marriage. You don't just walk away. He said you told your sister you'd never date me. That's walking away. I said I was talking to my sister. That's what sisters do. He was quiet. Then he said okay. I thought that meant he understood. I thought that meant he would come back. He did not come back. Instead, he started living like I said he should. He got a job, not a good one. He worked at a grocery store stocking shelves. But he got up every day. He shaved. He wore clean clothes. He became the man I said I wanted. I saw him once at the store. I was buying food. He was wearing a uniform. He looked at me. He nodded like I was a customer. He said, can I help you find something? I said, David, stop. He said, I'm working. You should respect that. He said it calm. So calm. I left the store without buying anything. My friends asked me if I had talked to him. I said yes. I said he was being cold. They said, maybe you need to apologize. I did apologize. I called him and I said, I'm sorry you heard that. He said, what are you sorry for? I said, for hurting your feelings. He said, you were honest. Don't be sorry for being honest. I could tell he meant something else. I could tell he thought my honesty was the real problem. I got mad again. I told Sarah he's punishing me for one sentence. Sarah did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, Maya, maybe he's not punishing you. Maybe he's just listening to you. I did not like that. I did not like that at all. 2 months in, I started to feel it. The quiet in the house, the empty side of the bed. I had to do everything myself, just like before, but now there was no hope it would get better. Before I could tell myself when David gets back on his feet, this will change. Now there was no David. There was just the mess and the bills and the silence. I called him again. I said, this is hurting me. He said, I know. I said, so come back. He said, why? I said, because we're married. He said, you want to be married to a man you would never date. I said, people change. You changed. I changed. He said, yes, we did. I could not reach him. He was so calm. It was like talking to a wall that was polite but did not move. I tried different ways. I sent him messages with memories. Remember our first date? He did not reply. I sent him a picture of us from 5 years ago. He replied, we looked happy. I said, we can be that again. He said, I don't think so. My friends started to change. One of them, Jessica, she called me. She said, David came to the gym. He looks really good. I said, what? She said, he's been working out. He seems different. I felt a cold feeling in my stomach. I said, did you talk to him? She said, just hi. He was friendly, but he didn't ask about you. That was when I started to panic. Not because I loved him, but because he was moving on. He was becoming the man I wanted, but he was doing it without me. I went to his job. I waited outside. When he came out, I said, we need to talk. He said, I have a therapist appointment. I said, you're in therapy? He said, yes, you should be proud. I'm getting help. He said it without a smile. He said it like it was my idea. I said, take me with you. He said, that's not how it works. He walked away. I called Sarah. I was crying. I said, he's leaving me for real. Sarah said, Maya, he left the day he heard you. You just didn't believe him. I said, how can he do this over one thing? Sarah was quiet. Then she said, it wasn't one thing. It was everything you said to me. He just heard the summary. I said, you told him? She said, no, but words have weight. You told me every week for a year how much you didn't want him. He felt that. Hearing it just made it real. I hung up. I was angry at her too now. 3 months. The papers came. Divorce. Irreconcilable differences. I called him. I said, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. He said, I'm already in counseling. My therapist asked me what I want. I said, I want to feel like I'm not a mistake. And being with you makes me feel like a mistake. I said, that's not fair. He said, you said you would never date me. That's not fair either, but it's true. I said, I was tired. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. He said, you meant it. And that's okay. You get to want what you want. But I get to want what I want too. And I don't want to be with someone who sees me as a burden. I said, I don't see you as a burden. He said, then why did you tell everyone I was? I had no answer because I did. I told Sarah. I told my friends. I told anyone who would listen. I built a case against him. I made him the bad guy in my story. He said, I'm going to sign the papers. I think you should too. I said, what about the house? He said, you keep it. I'll take my stuff this weekend. I'll come when you're at work. I said, you don't even want to see me. He said, seeing you hurts. I'm trying to stop hurting now. That weekend, I stayed home. I wanted to see him. I wanted to make him look at me. I thought if he saw me, he would remember. He came on Saturday morning. He had a key. He knocked first. He did not just walk in. He respected the boundary. I opened the door. He said you were supposed to be at work. I said I took the day off. He said okay. He went upstairs. I followed him. He took his clothes. He took his books. He took his toothbrush. He left the pictures of us. He left the wedding album. He left his ring on the dresser. I said that's it. 8 years and you're taking 3 bags. He said I'm only taking what's mine. You can have the rest. I said you're mine. He looked at me. It was the first time I saw something break in his face. He said no, you made it clear I'm not. He walked out. I watched him put his bags in his car. It was a small car. He had rented it. He looked smaller too, but also taller. He stood straight. He had been working out. He had been shaving. He looked like the man I married. But he was not mine. I called Sarah. I said he's really gone. She said I know, I'm sorry. I said do you think I'm a bad person? She did not answer right away. That was my answer. I stopped calling my friends. They stopped calling me. They were David's friends too. They chose, or maybe they didn't have to choose. Maybe they just saw what I did. 4 months. I saw him again. Not at the store, at a coffee shop. He was sitting with a woman. She was laughing. He was smiling. It was the first time I had seen him smile in a year. I wanted to go in. I wanted to say that's my husband, but he was. He was a man who looked like him, a man who looked happy. I went home and I looked at the wedding album. I looked at his face. He was young. He was hopeful. He loved me. I loved him. I tried to remember when it changed. When did I stop seeing him and start seeing a project? When did I start needing him to be better instead of needing him? I realized it was not his job loss that broke us. It was my patience. My patience was not real. It was a clock. I was counting down. I was waiting for him to be the man I deserved. And when he wasn't, I stored up my anger. I gave it to Sarah. I gave it to my friends. I gave it to everyone but him. And when I finally gave it to him, it was not a gift. It was a knife. 5 months. The divorce was final. I signed the papers. He signed the papers. We did it through lawyers. We did not speak. I kept the house. He kept his peace. My sister came to visit. She brought wine. We sat in the same kitchen where I said the words. She said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I miss him." She said, "I know." I said, "Do you think he will ever come back?" She said, "No." I said, "Because I was honest." She said, "Because you were cruel, and you thought it was honesty." I started to cry. She held my hand. I said, "I didn't know I was being cruel." She said, "I know, that's the sad part. I still call his old phone number sometimes. It is disconnected. I look at his social media. He does not have any. He disappeared from the internet. He disappeared from my life, but I see him in my mind. I see him standing in the doorway with the glass in his hand. I see him putting the ring on the dresser. I see him smiling at that woman in the coffee shop. I see what I broke. I see what I can't fix. I tell myself I was just tired. I was just honest. I was just talking to my sister. But the truth is, I wanted him to hear me. I wanted him to know how disappointed I was. I wanted him to feel it. And he did. And he left. And he gave me what I asked for. He gave me a life without him. I have it now. I have this quiet house. I have my job. I have my bills. I have my freedom. I would give it all back to have him on the couch again. Even in his old t-shirt. Even with the dishes in the sink. Even with the silence. Because the silence now is permanent. And it turns out I would rather have him here imperfect than not here at all. But that is just what I think now. Now that it is too late. Now that I am the woman who got what she wanted and learned it was not what she wanted. The ring is still on the dresser. I can't throw it away. I can't wear it. It just sits there. A circle that means nothing. A promise I broke with one sentence. I tell myself I didn't know. I tell myself I was a good wife. I tell myself he was weak. But every night when I come home to the empty house, I know I was the one who left first. I just did it with words. He only followed my lead.